Hi there. Today I want to talk about some languages are more difficult than others. When I said in a recent video that I found Russian to be difficult, I think Russian is difficult because of cases and verbs of motion and aspects of verbs. People say, well, you shouldn't say that. That discourages people. I must say, I don't understand that attitude. So you wouldn't study a language if it was difficult? You will only study a language if it's easy? If I think it's difficult, I shouldn't say that I think it's difficult. I just don't understand the mentality there. Obviously, for a speaker of Ukrainian, Russian is not difficult. But for a speaker of English, Russian is difficult. And Korean is difficult. I'm finding Korean very difficult. Even though I have an advantage over some people in that I have the Chinese vocabulary, the Japanese, in a way, is a hindrance because the word order is the same as Korean, but in fact, they say things differently. So my brain starts going down a Japanese pathway instead of a Korean pathway. But however difficult it is, that only makes it more challenging. And again, as long as the process is enjoyable, it doesn't really matter if it's difficult. I'm very much looking forward to getting into my now where are we here? Getting into my uh, Kim Young Ha podcast because as I was running my son's dog through the forest, and I'm going to show you some shots of our beautiful old growth forest, massive fir trees and the waterfall and the whole works. Listening to Kim Young Ha and not understanding much, so now I want to read it, and I do it on our new app for the iPad, which looks like this, and it's much better organized with courses and lessons, and you can even look at it one sentence at a time rather than the whole text, and many, many more features. But unfortunately, there's a few little glitches that have to be fixed before we launch it, so I'm not allowed to talk about it, so you didn't hear that. But it's great, and I look forward to getting back to that as soon as I finish doing this video. Speaking of languages not being difficult, obviously Ukrainian and Russian are very similar, so it's a lot of fun for me. Oh, and I should add, Russian is difficult, but I've spent enough time at it, and I spent 5 years at Russian. Korean, I'm trying to condense it into these 3 months, do as much as I can. With Russian, I just kind of rolled with the program, did an hour a day, but now I'm in the situation where I can listen to any interview, any discussion. I understand everything they're saying. The odd thing that escapes me if the line of thinking is a little obtuse, but by and large, not a problem. And now I'm listening to the Ukrainian television and picking up more and more of it. And what's so fascinating and what I find so admirable is that they will interview someone, and the announcer speaks Ukrainian, and the person he's interviewing or she's interviewing speaks Russian, and it's like nothing. It's like they just do it. That would never happen at home. If it's a French television station, even if they both speak English, it's in French. And if one of them answers in English, it'll be translated, but not there. It's like as if it's one language. Now, I think the languages are so similar that people are used to hearing them and they understand them. But it's still admirable, and it implies a level of tolerance of the languages that kind of seems to contradict a lot of the politics. A lot of the politicians try to make things out of language politics. There's no question in my mind that if Russian is spoken by half the population and is the native language of half or 40% of the population, then it should be an official language, and it should be the language of instruction at universities. It should be available. It should be possible to take one's university degree. And I think for the Ukraine to hang together, they have to come to some kind of sense of compromise. Yes, they need to protect the Ukrainian language and build it up as the national language of the Ukraine, but I think they have to recognize that people don't simply want to change their native language for political reasons. So hopefully there's some compromise there. It was interesting watching a scene in the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada, which is their parliament, where this lady representing the Party of Regions, which is mostly the eastern and southern part of Ukraine, and she was basically challenging across the sort of assembly hall there the members of the Party Svoboda, and was basically telling them that they're messing things up because they're feeding the Russian propaganda machine, because they tried to intimidate this television manager in Kiev who aired Putin's speech after he annexed, or Russia annexed Crimea. and they told him, like this was, he was a traitor. I don't know what they were saying. And so this little plucky little lady was saying, you're damaging our reputation. And she went on to say, look, where I come from, people are concerned, and the older generation, the pensioners and so forth, they want to be part of Russia because they grew up in the Soviet Union. That's what they know. And the younger group, they want a little more independence, and they want to keep the Russian language. And it seems to me perfectly legitimate aspirations. So she's a Ukrainian. She wants to keep Ukraine together. And she's telling these Svoboda types to back off. And then they show these Svoboda types that look like absolute thugs shouting across the hall and stuff like that. Now, fortunately, Svoboda hopefully has limited influence. I think Svoboda has more influence in this interim government than they will have after elections, because all of the polls show them, less than 5%, and their leader, whatever his name is, Tahanehuk or something, is even less than that. So, but those are some of the issues that Ukraine has to deal with if it's going to come together as a country. So Ukraine, and it was the same when I was listening to my Portuguese podcast from Portugal. They would regularly interview Spanish people from Spain without any translation, going out to a Portuguese-speaking audience, and they could just understand it. So obviously there are some languages that are not difficult, but for an English speaker, both Russian and Korean are difficult. And that's all I'm going to say today. Bye for now.